on venture. So this week I'm going to talk a little bit about what it was actually like to be on venture. A lot of people used to ask me, and still do actually to this day, do I regret having made that decision to live on venture? The answer is always no. I have no regrets whatsoever. My biggest regret, actually, funnily enough, is actually moving off venture. I do miss that boat, but it became, for me, I'm 6'4", it became quite difficult to live on board a boat which I could only stand up in 3 places. I could stand in the shower, I could stand in the lounge, and I could stand in the kitchen. Not the kitchen, sorry, the toilet. So yeah, it was a challenge. It was a hell of a challenge, and I think if not for those problems for me, I think I'd probably still be on it to this day. Unfortunately, I think it was the wrong boat. It was definitely the wrong boat for me. Definitely made for much shorter people. But having said that, I decided one year that I wanted to expand the top of the boat and make it more usable, because there were on many occasions we were sat outside having a lovely barbecue, and then all of a sudden the weather would change, and there'd be horizontal rain, and everything had to go back into the wheelhouse, and we had to sort of batten down the hatches and go back down into the inside the boat. So yeah, it was for me, it was very important to take that next stage, and it was also a bit of a gamble, because we were both very much in love with the way venture looked, and I was very concerned that I was going to destroy, by putting a roof. I basically wanted to put a roof from the back of the wheelhouse right the way down and enclose the whole of the back of the boat, and I was very concerned that I would just completely destroy the look of venture. But as it turns out, it didn't spoil the look of it at all. In fact, it made it look completely different. It did change the whole outlook of venture, but I did it in such a way. I wanted to follow the line. The wheelhouse roof, if you look at venture from the side, sort of sloped downwards, and I wanted to keep that line with the new roof and follow it all the way to the back of the boat. And fortunately, that line at the back of the boat was about my head height, so at the very rear, I couldn't quite stand up at the rear, but everywhere it didn't matter, because we had sofas in that area anyway, so it wasn't a big problem. But the rest of it was all, there was quite a lot of headroom, so and I made it strong enough with the help of my dad. We made it strong enough to support well, as many people as you wanted to upstairs, so you could actually stand on the roof. It was very, very strong. So yeah, it was a really good idea. And then after the build, we saved up some more money, managed to have made polyester sides with windows that you could roll up. I didn't want to completely build the sides of the boat up, solidly, so that you couldn't have access to it. I mean, it was such a beautiful spot we were living in. It seemed such a shame to sort of build a solid wall around venture, so I never wanted to do that. So the roll-up sides, you could roll up individual sides and use one side. You could obviously leave one side down and have one side up if the wind was coming from behind you, and vice versa. So we had some fantastic times just sat there without losing our view of the sea that was surrounding us. So yeah, really, really lovely. How far did I take venture while I had her? Well, not that far actually. I think the longest trip we did in venture was to East Head, which is just around the other side of Hayling Island. I only got insurance to have venture in Portsmouth Harbour and the Solent, which was, I didn't really want to take her any further than that. I think if you did, you'd need to get the boat up to a certain standard, and to be honest, you know, as long as you're stuck within stone's throw of Portsmouth Harbour, there was always the security of being able to get back. You know, the further you go, the more difficult it becomes. We joined the equivalent of the it's like a seagoing AA. I can't remember what they were called, to be honest, but they were a whole bunch of ribs. You pay your yearly fee. I think it was about £120 a year. Obviously, depending on the type of boat that you're insuring, and it covers you for breakdown. So that was great. So if you do break down, you just tell them where you are, and they come out. They speed out to you on one of their ribs, and if they can't fix it, then they'll tow you back to wherever you come from, so you can get it sorted out. But fortunately, never had to use them. But it was always just a peace of mind, really, to have these guys that were there ready and waiting. So East Head was quite an interesting mooring. It was quite a deep entrance to Chichester Harbour, and you were able to moor your boat literally a stone's throw from the beach. So I had a sea nav. I never drove anything in the sea without having a sea nav, and the sea nav gives you the depths. It shows you actually where you are, so you can see a little boat symbol, and you can see exactly where you are using GPS, and it tells you the depth of the water that you're at any one time, and those depths are set to the very lowest state of tide. So just off East Head, I think it was 10 metres. It was 10 metres deep, which is quite deep in places at the lowest state of tide. So I thought, well, that's fantastic. You know, we were easily I had a huge long chain for venture anchor at the front, anchor chain. So I drove into East Head, and the tide, I timed it so the tide was at quite a high level. So we got there. Tide was sort of heading out, so I nosed in towards the tide, dropped the anchor. Once I was happy that she was stable and holding on the anchor, which was, I left it quite a long time. It's always worrying when you throw an anchor down and that's your home, that it's holding. Left it quite a long time, and then once I was happy, I went down below and shut the engine down. And of course, once you're on the anchor and you've arrived at your destination on any boat, job one is to open a bottle of rum. So that was done, and I always a little bit concerned, you know, especially when you've done a bit of a journey. So I let things calm down a bit. We had a bottle of, we didn't drink a whole bottle of rum. We'd had a few glasses of rum, and then I went down below into the engine bay just to make sure things were okay. And I'm down below and I'm listening. I can hear this whirring noise. I'm thinking, oh, what is this? What is this noise? Where's it coming from? It was deadly quiet, and all you could hear was the trickle of water underneath the hull from down below, and this noise going on. I'm thinking, I have no idea where that's coming from. I was looking in the toilet area. I looked back, went into the bedroom. I came back. It was the loudest. It was in the engine room, and I'm looking around thinking, oh, wow, what is this noise? Anyway, I looked down below the engine, and there was the prop shaft from the engine to the prop whizzing around. And of course, the tide was heading out. We were being held on the anchor, and we got this big flow of water going underneath the boat, and it was turning the prop. The motion of the water was actually spinning the prop round. And I thought, wow, never seen that before. And we used to get some pretty fast tidal drains in Portsmouth Harbour, but it was always from the side, so it never really affected the prop. But yeah, that was quite an interesting event. Another time we went to, well, we did it a few times actually, Osborne Bay, which was just off the Isle of Wight, just outside Cowes. It's a beautiful spot. It's a people tend to only use it in the summer when the weather's good. It's a huge, big sand flat over there just off Osborne Bay, and it's ideal for anchoring. So one day we headed over to spend a couple of nights on the anchor, and arrived in Osborne Bay, went straight towards the bay, turned the boat round so it was parallel with the shore, and I thought this will be an ideal spot. So I pulled the throttle back to put her into idle, and the Morse throttle lever just went and something went bang underneath, and that was it. I could not control the engine. Something had snapped underneath the Morse, and I had no control over the engine. So I ran downstairs, because you couldn't shut the engine off from upstairs in the wheelhouse for some strange reason. I think that particular cable had been taken away for some reason. So you had to run downstairs through the lounge and into the engine room below, and then pull a manual fuel shut-off lever down in the engine bay. So I pulled that, ran back upstairs, got the anchor out, dropped the anchor, and fortunately the anchor, we were still in a really good spot, and we were able to get the anchor down, and it held the boat there. What had happened was the Morse, there's underneath the lever, there's a that you adjust forward and backward throttle. Underneath there's a sort of a lever which goes down and connects to the cable. Well, it was that lever that had snapped, and it turned out that the cable to the engine was in the process of seizing up. So you don't really feel it too much on the lever, but there was a hell of a lot of pressure below that Morse lever, which was trying to move the cable backwards and forwards, and it just gave up, and that was the end of that. I thank my lucky stars that happened where it did, because we were in the middle of Osborne Bay. It was completely open, there were no other boats around, and the throttle lever snapped. I was only sort of doing just above idle, but if we'd been coming back into Portsmouth Harbour and that had happened, I would have been approaching the jetty where she's moored. I would have throttled back, that would have snapped, and I would have just ploughed into the jetty and caused no end of damage, I'm sure. But so I'm to this day I think about that, and I think I'm so lucky that happened in Osborne Bay and not on the way back. So thank you, who was looking after us that day. Yeah, things could have been a lot worse. So we were actually planning a trip on in Venture to take her to, there's another marina in Hayling Island, so that was actually going to be our next destination, but that was cancelled for some reason, and we decided to take the boat out to Osborne Bay in the end. So yeah, very, very lucky there. Where is Venture now? Well, Venture, I sold her to a young couple who, similar to us, they came to see the boat and absolutely fell in love with her. Unfortunately, the couple that bought the boat, not unfortunately for them, but unfortunately for me, it's been a little bit selfish. They wanted to turn the boat into a more of a houseboat and not ever use her as an operational boat again, which meant taking the engine out, turning the engine bay into another bedroom. They wanted to raise a family on it, basically, which is absolutely fine. That was their plan, and I think, yeah, it's now residing in Gosport Lake, which is just off Portsmouth Harbour. So it's still round, it's still down in Portsmouth Harbour. In fact, recently I did go back and I drove down as close as I could to it, which is quite a long way away, but you could see her in the distance. And they've actually now built the sides up, whereas I had polyester sides with windows that rolled up. They've now got it looks like they've put wooden sides on with windows, built-in windows and everything, insulated, all done up properly like they said they were going to. So it doesn't really look particularly nice anymore. I think I sort of pushed the boundaries with Venture when I put the polyester sides on her, but it made it more of a useful space for us. But it's a shame. But good luck to them. When they bought the boat, they asked me if I'd reposition it for them to this mooring they found. In fact, they were living on a much smaller boat, and they said we've got a mooring here. It's quite a tricky mooring to get into, but would you be happy to drive her down there and position her for us? I said, yeah, absolutely, and I was more than happy to do that. So, day before it was due to be driven over, I went down to Venture because I wasn't living on her anymore. I'd moved off at that point, and I thought I'd just get the the hydraulics and the steering checked, because Venture, I hadn't driven her at that point for about a year and a half, and because she used to sit in the mud at low tide, being up and down twice daily. For a year and a half, may even have been 2 years actually since I'd driven her last. The rudder tends to get stuck in its position. It gets caked with mud, and it tends to get stuck. So, and also I had a hydraulic leak in the steering, so over a period of time it used to just drain out of the steering. So I got down there the day before, and I thought, I better just top all this up and make sure it's all functioning as I'm having to drive the boat. It was a sort of a 40-minute drive away from where we were. So got the hydraulics all topped up. When it was tied to its mooring, if you turn the steering one way whilst the boat was in drive, so the prop turning, you can see it sort of tugging on the ropes. And then you turn the steering the other way, and it comes back into the jetty, and then you turn the steering the other way, and it sort of moves out. Well, I checked all that. It seemed to be fine. But what I hadn't realised at the time was that when it was coming off the jetty, when I was turning the wheel, it looked like it was steering, but it was actually just relaxing. As I found out the next day, everyone was on board, and we disconnected everything, let go of the ropes, and off I went from the jetty. Pushed the front of the boat out, and off we went. And as I started to move out, I started to make the first turn, and she just would not turn. There was absolutely no way that boat was turning to the right. I just couldn't do it. It would go left, but it wouldn't go right. So a little bit of panic set in at that point, and I thought, how am I going to do? We can't go back because I can't steer this thing. So, and I'd cancelled, breakdown had all been cancelled and everything. So anyway, I said to the guys, I said, look, we're heading straight towards some moorings in the centre of Fareham Creek, so we'll just coast in there as slow as possible, and we'll have to try and sort this out. But as I was driving towards it, I kept turning the steering wheel one way, and I turned it back the other way, and I turned it back the other way, and eventually I noticed that the nose of the boat, when I did full right lock, it started to move slightly, very, very slightly, as we were sort of chugging along. And then it got better, and I came back the other way, and it got better, and I said to the guys, I said, actually, this so whatever's happening here, it's freeing up. Until eventually I managed to get quite a nice little turn to the right going on, and I thought, well, okay, let's just keep going. She's moving, let's keep going. So down we headed all the way down towards Gosport, and we had to go through a bridge which had to be raised. You had to make an appointment to have this thing lifted up. It was just a walkway bridge, I think, but they had that arranged. So we were in a little bit of pressure to get down there in time for our opening of this bridge. So anyway, got through there and got it into where the mooring was, and although it wasn't the highest tide, I knew that at that point where they wanted it moored, it would be likely that we'd be sat on the mud. And sure enough, I got her lined up for this mooring. It took quite an effort. It was quite a tight little mooring, but once we got it in position, I literally had to give it full throttle to drive Venture onto this little muddy mooring. I think it couldn't have been about more than just under 2 meters deep at that point. So yeah, I literally had to drive her onto the mud, and they were very grateful. And we stopped and had a cup of tea with them and everything, and then we said our goodbyes, and that was the last I saw of Venture. But yeah, they're still living on it, I believe, and it's still there. I don't think it'll ever move again. So that was kind of Venture's last journey, I believe. Well, hopefully. Who knows what will happen to her in the future, but at the moment she's making a fantastic home for a young family, so good luck to them.